When we start talking about neurons, it helps to picture them as the basic communication units of the nervous system because every signal that moves through the body begins with a neuron sending information. And neurons work in a very organized way where they receive signals, process them, and then send new signals forward. And all of this happens through electrical and chemical changes that take place inside and outside of the cell. And once you understand this pattern, the rest of nervous system physiology becomes much easier to follow. Neurons are different from most cells because their main job is to carry messages quickly over long distances, and for that they have a shape that supports fast communication. And a neuron has three main parts: the dendrites, which receive information, the cell body, which processes it, and the axon, which carries the signal to the next cell. And this simple structure explains how signals move through the body in a smooth direction instead of jumping around randomly. A neuron is always ready to send a signal, and the reason it can do this is because it maintains something called the resting membrane's potential, which means the inside of the neuron is slightly more negative than the outside. And this charge difference happens because the neuron controls the movement of the ions like sodium and potassium, and it keeps more potassium inside and more sodium outside. And by maintaining this difference, the neuron stays prepared to fire whenever it receives the right stimulus. An action potential begins when the neuron reaches a certain threshold, and once this happens, sodium channels open and sodium rushes inside, making the inside less negative, and this rapid change in electrical charge moves along the axon like a wave, allowing the signal to travel from one end of the neuron to the other. And after the wave passes, potassium moves out of the cell to bring the neuron back to its resting state, which prepares it to fire again if needed. Not all neurons send signals at the same speed, and the speed depends mainly on two things: the diameter of the axon and whether the axon is covered by myelin. The myelin acts like insulation, allowing the signals to jump between gaps called nodes or ranvier, and this jumping makes the signal much faster than it would be otherwise. And this is why reflexes happen so quickly because the neurons involved are built for fast conduction. A synapse is the point where the one neuron communicates with another cell, and it can be another neuron, a muscle cell, or a gland cell. And most synapses in the body are chemical synapses, which means the signal changes from an electrical impulse inside the neuron to the chemical message in the synaptic space. And this space is very small, but the events happening there decide whether the message continues or stops. When an action potential reaches the end of the axon, calcium channels open and calcium enters the neuron, and this triggers vesicles filled with neurotransmitters to move toward these synaptic membranes. And these vesicles fuse with the membranes and release neurotransmitters into the synaptic cleft. And the neurotransmitters cross the tiny gap and bind the receptors on the next cell. And this binding tells the next cell whether it should activate, inhibit, or adjust its response. There are many neurotransmitters in the body, and each one has a specific role, and some are excitatory, meaning they encourage the next cell to send a signal, while others are inhibitory, meaning they reduce the chance of a signal. And common neurotransmitters include acetylcholine, which helps muscle movement, dopamine, which affects motivation and control, serotonin, which influences mood, and GABA, which slows down activity in the nervous system. And the balance between these chemicals shape how the brain and body functions. After a neurotransmitter does its job, the body must remove it so the synapse can reset. And this can happen in a few ways. And one method is reuptake, where the neurotransmitter is taken back into the neuron that released it. And another method is enzymatic breakdown, where enzymes break the neurotransmitter into inactive parts, and sometimes neurotransmitters simply diffuse away from the synapse, which also helps clear the space for the next signal. Neuron communication is what allows the body to think, move, feel, and respond, and disruptions in the communication can lead to changes in mood, movement, memory, or coordination. And because neurons rely on electrical and chemical signals working together, anything that affects ions, receptors, synapses, or neurotransmitters can change how the nervous system behaves. And understanding this helps explain why the nervous system can adjust quickly in some situations and struggle in others.